So Scott, I'm really glad you're going to talk about the cycle of addiction because I referred to a webinar that you had done a while back with it again this week. So this is very timely. I appreciate you doing it.
I was going to talk about the cycle of abuse, but do you want me to talk about the cycle of addiction?
I'm sorry. Let's either or both.
I'd rather talk about the cycle of addiction. So there we go. Let me call up the proper cycle of addiction.
I literally told somebody that, to go find the YouTube on this because it was like I could hear this person, on the treadmill of that. So this would be, yeah, I guess I really prefer you do that.
We're going to do this. We're going to, and I know that lecture better. So yeah, we'll talk about the cycle of addiction today. And this is useful information for both betrayed partners as well as addicts. It's really useful for addicts, but it's useful for betrayed partners too, because we can recognize what's going on. We can understand what happens. And it's also useful away from addiction because a lot of behavioral stuff spins on this same kind of cycle. So I'm going to share screen real quick and show the cycle of addiction. There it is. So addiction is, it's a cycle, it spins. There's no real beginning or middle or end, but we're going to act like there is today. And we're going to start with triggers. Triggers are exactly what they sound like. They are the catalysts that trigger the need or the desire to engage in some type of escapist behavior, which is what addictions are. Triggers can be, let's stop for a second. Triggers can be emotional or, we call them internal or external. Internal triggers are typically emotional, anxiety, stress, boredom, resentment, things like that. And then external triggers for, say, a sex addict would be, walking down the street, and there's a billboard and, a sexy woman, or you're clicking through the channels and it's, inadvertently land on Game of Thrones and they're naked, or whatever. So, or external triggers can be, crisis in the family, or, any kind of a conflict, whether it's at work or at home or, on the street or whatever. Most of our triggers are what we call intertwined. Something happens in the world, that's an external trigger, and then we have a feeling about it, which is an internal trigger. And the whole crux of addiction is I am having a feeling that I don't like, and I want to escape it. So triggers are really important. I always stress when I'm teaching this to addicts, you've got to identify your triggers, everything. You've got to know them inside and out, because this is when we have a chance to intervene. If I recognize I'm bored and lonely, I can say, oh, I'm bored and lonely. My head will slip into the next stage, which is fantasy. We'll get there in a second. Or I can recognize I'm bored and lonely, and maybe I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, Tammy, what's happening? I'm feeling bored and lonely. You got a few minutes to chit chat. And then my need that's causing these feelings is met and the feelings go away. So I believe this is my cat who's screwing up my screen now.
It's all good.
The Zoom bummer, yes. So Tammy, anything you want to add about triggers?
No, have a plan, identify them, and know that there'll be some things that you don't think of initially that end up becoming necessary to add to the list. So you aren't going to get it 100% right necessarily the first time, but be aware and have a plan. So, okay, next.
Yeah, and pay attention to the emotional triggers, because that's the stuff that really drives this. So when I'm feeling lonely or bored or anxious or stressed or depressed or whatever, my coping mechanism, and I'll speak for myself as a recovering sex and porn addict, is, my primary go-to coping mechanism is to slide forward into sexual fantasy. If I'm an alcoholic, I'll start thinking about alcohol or things like that. Whatever acting out means for us down here at the lower level. We start fantasizing about it. We start thinking about it. And sex in particular is an incredible escapist mechanism. At this point in fantasy, we're already escaping. If I was stressed about the pile of work on my desk and I start fantasizing about Susie and accounting, guess what I'm not thinking about? I'm not thinking about the pile of work on my desk. It's a wonderful coping mechanism, sort of, except it comes with massive problems sometimes. But I slide forward into fantasy and kind of without even often that's unconscious. I don't consciously think, oh, I'm going to fantasize about Susie from accounting so that my boredom goes away. I just do it. I'm not even aware of it usually. And often I will start to ritualize. Ritualization is taking steps toward actually acting out. We'll have guys come in and talk to us and they'll say, well, it was Friday and I got my paycheck. And the next thing I knew, I was in the backseat of my car with 2 hookers and an 8-ball of cocaine. I have no idea how it happened. And we're like, really? The next thing you knew, it was 4 o'clock on Friday. And the next thing you knew, it was 3 a.m. And you're, got hookers and cocaine and, flashing red lights and, and you don't know how you got there. There's a lot of steps. It's like, I get my paycheck. I call the drug dealer. I, cruise the neighborhood, or I, shop online for my prostitutes, and then I pick them up, and there's a whole lot of steps. Porn addicts, I love walking them through ritualization because a lot of them, they wait for their wife to go to bed and fall asleep. As soon as the wife is, or they'll, even when the wife is awake, they'll say, you know what, I'm just going to go down to my office and check my email. We are ritualizing at this point. And they leave the room, turn off the light, they go downstairs to their office, walking down the stairs, part of the ritual. Going into their office, part of the ritual. Sitting down, turning the computer on, part of the ritual. Checking their email, which they said they were going to do, is part of the ritual. And then they're like, oh, I'll check the news. I'll check the sports scores. Ooh, clickbait. Ooh, this, ooh, that. Boom. The next thing they know, 6 hours have gone by. Their pants are around their ankles. Their kid's beating on the door, which they locked for no apparent reason, right? Because we don't lock our door to check email, but so it's part of the ritual. Lock the door. I got to save space. There's so many steps, and every time we take a step on this cycle of addiction, let's go back there, we're getting a little bit more high. As soon as we go into fantasy, we're getting a dopamine rush. And sometimes a little adrenaline. We're getting a little bit high. These are the chemicals that get us high, whatever our drug is. And every time we take a step in the ritual, we up the level of dopamine and usually adrenaline that we're pumping through our brain. We're getting a little bit more high. These are the same neurochemicals that pump through my brain if I'm doing cocaine. Just from fantasizing and prepping to look at porn. And cocaine addicts will tell you, they get high when, they put the cocaine on the table. I don't want to trigger anybody, but they put the cocaine on the table and they get out the razor blade and they chop it up and they roll up the $100 bill because, they want to be cool. They're almost as high doing that as they are when they sniff cocaine. And porn addicts are almost as high doing that as we are when we're looking at porn. And sex addicts, same thing, the preparatory steps. By the time we actually get around to acting out, we're really high. And interestingly, by the way, cocaine addict brains and sex and porn addict brains are almost indistinguishable. And you can tell us from an alcoholic, from an opiate addict, but we look like coke addicts. So sex and porn addicts, this is a very powerful addiction. It's right up there with cocaine. And the fantasy and the ritual, we're already high. We're already in what we call the bubble or the trance. Let's stop for a second, because I think this is important. Our goal is to escape. And as soon as we start fantasizing, we are escaping, and we're manipulating our neurochemistry in a way that we're high. And we get in this, I picture like this big fishbowl around my head where it's me and my sexual fantasy and the steps I'm taking, and I'm up in the ante with ritualization. And it's just me and my sexual fantasy. And that's it. I mean, I'm not lonely, I'm not bored, I'm not afraid. I didn't just have a fight with my wife or my boss. Um, I'm just in there and I'm high. I mean, I am lost.
In this example, when you're talking about the person going down the basement, I'm going, they're already getting
Oh yeah.
dopamine going down the stairs,
Every
like it's,
step they take down the staircase, they're getting higher and
and when
higher.
and when you talk about the brains looking the same, you're talking about the dopamine, the areas of the brain that lights up with
Yeah,
with dopamine based on what you're doing. And like nicotine, smoking and vaping,
right.
have, I mean, so there's different things have different levels. So what Scott's saying is a very powerful stimulant such as
Yeah,
cocaine and sex and porn addicts, you can't distinguish
right.
between the level of intensity that they get, where the brain lights up. So
Yeah. And you can actually tell an addict even when they're at rest, when they're not using or even thinking about it, because certain longer term damage is done to the brain. And we still look like cocaine addicts even at rest. Um, so we're in this bubble, this trance, and we're not thinking about negative consequences. I mean, Dr. Rob, I saw him interviewed, I think it was on Larry King, after one of the senators or governors or somebody got in trouble for doing what they do. I think it's probably Anthony Weiner, maybe back in the day. And I think Larry, whoever it was, I think it was Larry, said, what are these people thinking? And Rob said, they're not. They're in a fantasy. They're not thinking about all the things they have to lose. They're not thinking about their wife. They're not thinking about their kids. They're not thinking about their jobs or their reputation or any of this stuff, because they're in a fantasy. And nothing bad happens in fantasies. When I fantasize about, being an NFL quarterback, we win the Super Bowl, every time. I mean, I'm really good in my fantasies. But, that's what fantasies are. Everything's perfect. So, and when we talk to sex addicts, the actual acting out, which is the next stage, rarely lives up to the fantasy. Um, but eventually, enough fantasy, enough ritualization, enough bubble, and we do get to acting out, where we look at porn or we hire the prostitute, we do whatever. Eventually we have an orgasm. That is usually what brings acting out to an end. And our bubble goes pop, and suddenly we're back in the real world. As soon as that orgasm happens, pop, we're back in the real world. One of two things happens. We either numb out a little bit, which is we engage in denial. Oh, well, it wasn't that bad this time. Or, if you're like me and you have a cross addiction, I would get drunk so as not to feel the pain of, the shame I had about acting out, or I would get high, or, and I would spin in that cycle for a little while and numb myself. Or the one thing we see, particularly with chemsex addicts, is they become a good boy. They numb out by becoming, I'm going back to the gym, I'm buckling down at work, all of that. And they numb out. Then it helps them forget the shame of this bender they just went on. But eventually we get around to what we call despair, which is shame and guilt. And yeah, we feel miserable. And doesn't despair sound a whole lot like triggers? Shame, despair, yucky. We don't want to feel yucky. So of course we go to fantasy, and we just spin in this cycle. And we can do this endlessly. I mean, I did this for decades. And unfortunately, the cycle, it's really not as circular as it looks. It's more of a downward spiral. I've been told not to use toilet flushing metaphors, but this is what happens. We just whoosh, and when things get bad enough, you find seeking integrity and ask for some help. But the cycle, and there's a couple of other things that are important about the cycle. All addictions, we develop tolerance and escalation. All addictions. Nobody ever said, I'm going to be a heroin addict. Woo! Everybody is like me in 7th grade, says, I'm going to have a beer at the boy girl party. I'm going to be cool. And then it's 6 beers, and then it's 12 beers, and then it's drugs and scotch, and you wake up one day and you're in an alley, you got a needle in your arm, think, how did I get here? This is not what I set out to do. Sex addiction is the same way. It's particularly easy to see escalation with porn addiction, because we up the ante of what we're looking at and often violate our values, cross a lot of lines. But sex addicts escalate, I'll never see a prostitute. I'll never cheat on my wife. I'll never, and boom, 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 boom. Just, right up or down the ladder, I guess would be more accurate. So we escalate, and, hence the downward spiral. The other thing that's important to note here, and this is why we teach the cycle of addiction, is, Tami, where do I have a chance to intervene?
Before you start, or at the triggers is the best place. Is as soon as I have a plan for, I'm going to be triggered. Like pretending that I'm never going to be triggered is fantasy in and of itself. So knowing that there are triggers, and what do I do to make sure that I'm not slipping through the cycle?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a cycle. There's no beginning or end, but since we're calling triggers the beginning, the earlier in the cycle we can intervene, the better off we are. If I can recognize the feeling I don't want to have, I can do something about that. I'm hungry. I can eat a sandwich. Oh, I feel better. I don't, but if I slide forward into fantasy, it gets harder. Because I'm in a fantasy and it's pleasant and nothing bad is happening. And as soon as I start taking steps, I get into this ritualization. It gets much, much harder to stop. And eventually, without external intervention, we get deep enough in this cycle, we will act out. And this is a cycle for all addictions, not just sex and porn addiction. But we talked about it with sex and porn addiction today. So Tami, anything you want to add to that?
I do. I want, first of all, I was really good at making the despair area the smallest possible. Like my circle was very fast, I just kind of skipped right forward to the, I probably went right to ritualization. I don't think there was enough time to even get to triggers because, I just, it was like nonstop. But I hear people that go, oh yeah, it's like I relapse every, 60 days or 90 days. And I was like, well, you're still on the circle. You're still on the cycle. Like I won't use circle. You're still on the cycle. So there isn't these all take a certain amount of time. They're all equal length. They're not. The acting out can be the shortest, amount of time, because, you can be planning for, all day while you're at work and, act out, with a sex worker for, 15 minutes, this is a lovely diagram, but that does not represent actual length of time, or right. That this happens every X amount of days or what. It doesn't. Right. It's everybody's different. But I always say it's kind of like that pressure cooker. Things are building, and boom, then we're on a roll.
Yeah, and this numbing stage is what Tami's talking about. I can be sober for a month or two, and I'm feeling really good about myself because I'm being a good boy. It's the good boy numbing stage. Or, I'm not acting out sexually because I'm getting high every night or whatever. And I'm feeling good because I'm not acting out. And that can go for 2-3 months sometimes. But eventually the despair hits, and there we go again. Anything else?
So no, we've got some questions. I'll read them so that you can save your voice. So okay, thank you both for your time. My SAPA partner is in early sobriety, sees a CSAT, does couples work with me, and is making progress. But this has come after years of lies, broken promises, and infidelity. I've noticed things in his accountability app that I find questionable, videos, articles, etc. But he claims they mean nothing. I sometimes have noticed his behaviors before he does do before I notice his behaviors before he does due to my hypervigilance. I obviously can't be the thought police, nor do I want to be. And I know I'm not supposed to be his accountability partner, but he is resistant to groups, so he hasn't met anyone who could do this for him yet. My question is, how do my feelings fit into his recovery? Should something that triggers me, but not him, be avoided? This is it's complex, but this is a great question. And we hear this all the time, don't we, Scott? Of like, I'm resistant to this, and trust me, the addict, that I'm doing this right and I'm taking care of myself, etc. Regardless and despite your feelings and your hypervigilance, which is your safety seeking because you're concerned, even if he's not. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to address the addict part of this,
Please.
and I'm going to encourage the questioner to dig up this video and show it to your addict partner so he can hear me say, you need a group. Okay, if you could do this on your own, you would have done it a long time ago. I know you would rather eat a plate of worms than ask for help, but you need some help. We have a sex addiction work group, an online work group that starts next Tuesday. 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Go to Tami she's better at pointing than me.
Yeah.
Go to SeekingIntegrity.com. It's low cost. It's 6 weeks. It will get you in a group, and the guys get really supportive with each other. It's a small group. It's a safe group. I don't know what the resistance is to being in a group, but this is a bunch of guys who have the same problem you got, working on it and learning about it and supporting each other. This is how we get sober and stay sober. Until you do that, you're putting your poor wife, I'm assuming you're married, in the position of being the thought police and being your accountability partner. That is not healthy for you. It's not healthy for her. Every time she sees any little thing, she's going to get massively triggered. She's going to have post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, which means everything is going to come crashing back on her. This is not a way for either of you to heal. You're going to get some support beyond just your wife. It is not fair to her to put everything on her. Get over your resistance to groups. And I was resistant to groups. I mean, I wouldn't go to a 12-step meeting until my therapist threatened to fire me. My therapist was the only person I was talking to at that point in my life. So to a 12-step group, I'm so glad I did, because that changed my life. We got all kinds of stuff online. There are 12-step groups in person. There are 12-step groups online, but sign up for the work group next week. That'll get you a really good start in sobriety and also ease you into a group setting in a way that's much less, I think, scary. I'm going to let Tami either add to that or address the other half of the equation.
So I'm going to tag on to what you're saying about the work group, and this person's working with a CSAT. That's great. I can't tell you how many CSATs recommend to their clients that they participate in those work groups because they're supplemental to the work that they're doing. It's different than what you get in therapy. It's not therapy, but it's the psychoeducation that you don't get in therapy. And it's also connection. And some of the guys do, make connections with other peers and have accountability people that they can text with in between. Go ahead.
One of my very first groups, there was a bunch of guys who did level 1, level 2, part 1, part 2, and part 3. We're changing our language. They still meet every Saturday morning, 4 years later, because they bonded so much, and most of them are staying really solidly sober. Okay, back to you. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's good. So a few more things. He claims they mean nothing. If they mean nothing, they wouldn't be there. And then Kristen Snowden did a video earlier today at her webinar, and I don't think, because you weren't feeling well, I don't think it's been posted yet. It will be tomorrow. But she talked about healthy relationships, and it's like, what is the goal? What is the goal? If he wants to hold on to these things, I want to hold on to videos, and things that are questionable, and I don't care about you. That's a problem, for you as a partner, because then we always talk about healthy boundaries for you. What do you need for your safety? And he's creating a larger gap for you rather than creating, lessening the gap so that you guys can move together. And that would be something, if you're doing couples work with a different therapist, that therapist should possibly talk to his CSAT. This is complicated, but if you're doing couples work, the coupleship is the client, so not either one of you, but, then the couples therapist, or you can, provide, collaborative information to his CSAT for the individual work. But even, we talked about it on Dr. Rob's webinar on Monday night. Dr. Rob no longer does individual therapy, but when he was, he's really good at this stuff. But even just seeing him for 50 minutes once a week, is not enough. Scott and I can attest, this is a 24/7 issue, and we have to get ahead of that, of that curve. And we lie to ourselves first. That's the first lies we tell are to ourselves, that this doesn't really matter. I'm not in trouble. It doesn't, it's nothing, all of that. Because then we have to believe them so we can lie to you too. So, things that trigger. So your last question is, how do my feelings fit into his recovery? It's healthy boundaries for you. And Debbie McCrae did it's on our website. She did a great webinar. I think it was last Friday on, healthy boundaries. It was one of the last two, I can't remember now. But fear and healthy boundaries, and how, what are your healthy boundaries for you? But it's partly, I want to be in this relationship with you, but when you are unable to do things that will help me feel safe by doing things that are, irrelevant. If they don't mean anything, then the videos and things, why? So then I'm going to need to put my safety up, and that will, keep me further from you. So my whole thing is, if it's triggers for you, get help and support, but also create that safe boundary for you. Okay, next question. As a betrayed partner, how important is it that I have faith in my sex addict partner's sponsor? Can I ask my SA not to go to a sponsor for relationship advice? The advice generally seems to cause greater rupture to our repairing relationship. Example, his sponsor says, I have to read the text emails he sent to his emotional. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm sorry. You can tell where I'm going. Oh my gosh, okay. I have to read the text emails he sent to his emotional affair partners, as there is no sexual content, and I'm making too much of a big deal. I don't want to, because I will be triggered by it. I am more hurt by the years of secrets, lies, and hidden sexual behavior. What are my options here? My partner is listening to you. I think you just got my reaction. Oh my God, that is horrible advice. That is not relationship advice. That is no, no. That is not okay on any way, shape, or form. That is, we talk with formal therapeutic disclosure, there's no gory details. And I hate, quite frankly, when partners have discovery and have found that stuff, because you can't get it out of your head. It is in your head, and the stuff you make up about it, the trauma hole is deeper, and you have more work to do to get out of it. So that is, sponsors. My first sponsor was, I'll be kind, was not a really good fit for me. But that didn't keep me from getting into recovery and doing the work. I found somebody else. With sponsors, it is, what do they have that you want? This person does not sound like they have a great relationship, and are, it's experience, strength, and hope. This feels really challenging. So I'm going to take a breath. Scott, thoughts?
I had the same reaction you did. I just reread the question, so I didn't know when you were reading it.
I hadn't read it yet.
Look, a sponsor's job in sex addiction recovery is not to dispense relationship advice. It is to help the addict stay sober and to work through the steps. And that's kind of where the line gets drawn. It makes me a little nervous when a sponsor's giving, telling you what your wife needs to, that's just, is this sponsor a relationship therapist? Is it an LMFT, a marriage and family
Clearly
therapist?
not.
Yeah, that's terrible advice, just for the record, terrible advice. And you as the betrayed partner recognize what you need. You right here in the question, you say, I am more hurt by the years of secrets, lies, and hiding than the actual sexual behavior. And this is research backs this up. Betrayed partners are far more hurt by the secrets and the lies and the BS and the gaslighting than they are by the stuff that the addict is hiding. You need to start developing trust. And I don't see how reading texts and emails he sent to his emotional affair partner is building trust. That would be eroding it. And like Tami said, some stuff, once you know it, you can't unknow it. I mean, you cannot unbake a cake. And there's, you don't need these details. What you need is to know generally what happened, and then to see some behavior changes, including becoming more transparent, more honest, more truthful. What are your options here? So Tami, what are the options here for this addict and the betrayed partner?
Yes. So I want to also, like it's almost like this. Well, first of all, the sponsor is your partner's sponsor, not yours. So him telling you what you have to do is ridiculous. But it's almost like, well, it wasn't that bad because it wasn't sex. It's only emotional affairs. Guess what? My partner being emotionally connected to somebody would probably be, and I don't know this, I haven't fortunately had to deal with that, but I would be devastated by that, and probably more than him having a sex worker. I'm hopeful that I never have to experience either of those, but in my mind, the emotional connection, that's my deep connection with my partner. So that's a fracture and it's infidelity. And so having a sponsor pretend like, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. See, it wasn't sex. We have clients that come to our treatment program with porn addiction. Scott has talked a lot about that. Yeah. Guess what? It's still a betrayal. It's still cheating. It still takes you away from the relationship. And it isn't like, well, it's not as bad as, I haven't acted out. That's like saying, well, I only drank beer. I didn't drink whiskey. Like it doesn't matter. It still is, it still is a problem. So I would love to have you both seeing a qualified professional. If you don't have names of someone, email me, Tami, Tami at seekingintegrity.com. Let me know where you are, and I will help you find a qualified professional, each separately, one to work with the addict, one to work with the betrayed partner. But Scott also mentioned that handy dandy sex addiction, or porn addiction 101, part 1, sex addiction is starting, but we have a betrayed partner work group that starts again in June. Solid, helpful connections. We also have a number besides the webinars. I'm glad you're both on it, but the drop-in groups, we have multiple drop-in groups for each of you separately to get support, to be able to run something by, and all of our drop-in groups have someone moderating them to keep them a safe space. So someone would kind of go, hey, that isn't, don't thinking that's a really solid idea, and this is challenging work, getting the right input. But thank you for listening to you and going, nope, I'm taking care of me. Nope. So, okay. Okay. My husband has finished his circle plan and would like to share it with me. We have not had full therapeutic disclosure yet. He said there are behaviors in his middle circle that he hasn't done, but could be triggering for him. Is that normal to put things in your middle circle that you haven't done? What is the best way to go about this? I do not want any more trickle disclosures. Can you talk about the 3 circle, please? Because you help the guys with this a lot.
Yeah, a circle plan is a sobriety plan for sex addicts, and there are 3 circles, concentric circles. The bullseye, I usually call the red circle, but sometimes we call it the inner circle. The next one I call yellow. Some people call it middle, and then the outer circle I call it green. I go red, yellow, green. Some people call it inner, middle, and outer. I don't like the inner middle distinction because I'm really not sure whether, when you say middle circle, he's talking about the red or the yellow. But either way, the answer to this question,
let's say it's yellow, because I think he's talking about things that he hasn't done yet.
See, I actually read it the other way as red.
Oh,
but
interesting.
See, this is why I don't like the terminology.
Oh, anyway,
okay. So circle plan, in my red circle, I put, these are my bottom line behaviors. If I do this, I am not sober. The yellow circle is slippery places, people, places, thoughts, feelings. It's slippery stuff, caution, slow down. The outer circle or the green circle is healthy stuff, so it includes a mix of recovery activities and fun stuff, life affirming stuff, going back to school, hanging out with the kids, coaching the softball team, or, in addition to 12-step work and work groups and therapy and things like that. It needs to be a mix. So as far as where to put things that you haven't done, but you might do, it is not unusual to list those things. As a matter of fact, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you won't. And Tami, we both know the word, we hear it a lot. I haven't done that yet. And if, with a circle plan, you cannot be fudgy with it. Is that a word, fudgy? I think you know what I mean.
You just used it. I'm tracking, so.
Yeah, you can't be fudgy with your circle plan. You've got to be really specific, and you've got to cover everything. Because if I leave myself any wiggle room, hey, I'm an addict. I will take advantage of the wiggle room. So putting something that I haven't done yet, but I could down the line, and I just want to make sure I don't, I would put it in the circle plan. Absolutely. So that is not unusual. A circle plan is not a disclosure. A circle plan is, these are the things that I'm never going to do. These are the things that are slippery for me. These are the things that I'm going to do to help myself stay sober. And I actually encourage guys to share the circle plan with their partner. It's not a disclosure. It's not saying I did this, I didn't do this. Like, this is my plan. This stuff is 100% off limits. This stuff is slippery. When you're in the yellow circle, you can go one of two directions. You can go to the red or you can go to the green, decision time. And then the green circle, these are the healthy things that I'd like to be doing. And I actually like it shared because betrayed partners will say, what about this? Why isn't this in the red circle? Oh, I never even thought of that, but I'll put it in there. I noticed that you're slippery when this is happening. Oh, you're right. I'll put that in the yellow. And why don't you want to do this, this, and this for healthy activities? Oh my God, I never thought of that. It gives the betrayed partner some input. I actually like sharing the plan, but this is not a disclosure. Please do not confuse this with a full therapeutic disclosure, and you do need to have one. But I don't think it's out of line if you want to see the circle plan, for you to see it and have some input at this stage. But don't confuse it with disclosure. Tami, thoughts?
I do, and I have an invitation. Scott and our colleague Jason do 25 or 50-minute support sessions, and they often go through a circle plan with the guys to help, discuss it and kind of make sure that it's in pretty good shape, So it might be worth, those are on the Seeking Integrity site, but that it might be worth him having a short support session with either of them to go through things and then share with you if you, but Scott is 100%. And I do think timing wise, we encourage people as soon as possible to work on having a 3-circle plan. It's also called a relapse prevention plan. So you want to get that. And then formal therapeutic disclosure is usually, a few months down the road, and working with qualified professionals, and with both of you, it's a whole different process. I don't blame you for not wanting any more trickle disclosures. I 100% get that. And I could see how with something you'd be asking questions and he may share. So perhaps that there's set some boundaries upon, if he's sharing it, then, there's some questions you may decide those questions would be best answered in the company of a qualified professional. But I really think that he could benefit from, doing a short little support session with Scott or Jason. And I do them as well, but honestly, those guys are better at those than I am. So it's one of those where I would encourage you, if you got me, I would work on moving it because they will do a better job of helping. So.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate, I think the last thing I said, which is, if you want to see the circle plan, it's perfectly okay to see it. If you don't, because you think it's going to be too triggering, it's perfectly okay to say, I'd rather not. Why don't you talk to Scott or Jason or your sponsor or whoever? So yeah.
Okay. Next question. I find this part really hard to understand. They are thinking to restrain in certain situations. The steps that you are talking about, there is obvious restraint. For example, while they're sitting in the lounge with their wives, or while they are sitting, or while they're with family, friends' houses. Why can't you restrain there and then be invited back? So there's not, but not restrain in wife space, relationship, home, bed, bedroom, as I presume they want to be invited back to this relationship. This is such a stab in the heart. So thoughts?
I think the question is, why does my addict behave well in public, but crappy when we're home alone? I think is that how you're reading it?
Yeah. Well, and like I mentioned the pressure cooker earlier. It's like,
Yeah.
we can be really good for a bit and then.
Right. Yeah. Look, I mean, why did everybody think my mother was the nicest person in the world when I knew what she was like as soon as they left the house? It's like, yeah, we wait until you leave and the door closes and see what she's like. You know, I don't know why we do this. I don't know why we choose to hurt the people we love. There's a saying, hurt people hurt people. So he's got some underlying issues that have to be uncovered and worked on. The progress of recovery, the steps of
Process.
Thank you. Process. I am a little out of it today. First, we get sober. We break through our denial and we get sober. And then once we've got some solid sobriety, we start working on our underlying issues so we're not such, pardon my language, an asshole all the time, especially to the people we love. So it's kind of the second phase of recovery. The first phase is easier, frankly. It's easier to break through my denial and stop the behavior than it is to stop being a jerk and a liar and a meanie. And, there's some underlying trauma there that's going to have to be dealt with. And I'm sorry you're going through this. It's relatively common in any addiction relationship for this to be going on, and it's no fun for the betrayed partner. I really feel a lot of pain in this question. I want to validate that.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Rob says this all the time: nothing you did or didn't do caused this. Nothing you do or don't do, can change this. And so while it feels really personal, and that, look, he can be really nice to everybody else, and everybody else thinks he's a great guy and all this, but just like you said, that's compartmentalization and restraint. Well, you can only restrain so long, it's like at some point, so it is a process. There is healing. You having healthy boundaries for you is really, what will help you be safe, regardless of what he's doing or not doing. But it's okay to say, the guy that you are with everybody else, that's a much nicer guy than the guy that I get at the house. Next question: how do I stop the fantasy from going full-blown ritualization?
Great question. Just a great question. Like, how do I stop myself from acting out? Basically, lots of sobriety tools for sex addicts. Pick up the phone and call somebody. Tell them what you're thinking. That'll kill it right away. Even just texting somebody, "Hey, I'm triggered right now, and I caught myself in fantasy. I'm just texting to tell you I'm going to stay sober." That'll kill it. We have the 3-second rule, 1 second, oh, I'm objectifying or fantasizing, turn away if I'm objectifying or stop the fantasy, and then humanize the person I'm fantasizing about or objectifying. And second, number 3, do a gratitude list. I do a 10-item gratitude list. There's also a lot of mindfulness techniques. Dr. Fawcett, he normally does this, talks about mindfulness all the time. 4-7-8 breathing, in for 4, you count for 4, then you hold for a count of 7, you release for a count of 8. Do that 3 times. First of all, it drops your blood pressure about 10 points, which is great. I do this before I go to the doctor, which might be cheating. I don't know. But the other thing is, if I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 7, and holding the breath for 7, and then you got to time the exhale to go 8, it will break your chain of thought. Another one to break your chain of thought: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I touch, 2 things I smell, 1 thing I taste. You're counting, and you're looking at the world and listening to the world, it breaks the chain of thought. But the big thing is actually tell somebody. I'm fantasizing, somebody in recovery, preferably not your partner, because they will get upset usually. But call your sponsor, call a fellow in recovery. God, I'm slipping into fantasy. I don't want to move forward in the cycle. But I love that you're asking this question, because this is the right question to ask. It's like, okay, you told me about the cycle. Now, how do I stop? Tami, thoughts?
No, I think all of those are great. Debbie McCrae did this. Stop. She did, and I was like, well, that would interrupt it, if I'm doing, and you don't even have to say stop. You can be thinking stop.
Yeah. One of my guys in my work groups, it said he literally pictures himself like old school TV changing the channel.
Oh, great idea. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, and that works for me. I think you have to be a certain age to remember changing the channel by hand. But yeah, anything to break the thought.
Yes, and have a plan. So here's the really big thing is know it's going to happen and have a plan. What are you going to do when you do that? Because by the time you start hitting fantasy, it's like the boulder is rolling down the hill. So you have to, that's why we have a relapse prevention plan. We know what's in our outer circle, our green circle, because those are the healthy things. And so if you're slipping into this, it's call somebody. I mean, like you have a whole plan about this so that you don't have to keep, running around the cycle and go, oh, dang, I got to start, I got to start my counting days of abstinence over again. Okay, next question. I have quit drinking, drugging, and watching porn. That's fantastic. I went to an SA group in my area, and there were 2 people there, and about 3 to 4 months of sobriety between the 2 of them, and they were kind of skeptical about asking either of them to sponsor me. Do you have a 12-step program through Seeking Integrity? If not, suggestions. Work group. Start there, and then we've got drop-in groups. We've got multiple. They're not 12-step, but multiple. But you went to one SA group, and I get it, but we've got a whole list on SLAA, SA, SPAA. I mean, there's bunches of different things. So great, keep going.
Keep going. Explore the other 12-step programs for sexual recovery. Find the group and the meeting that you're most comfortable with that has more people for you to choose from, because 2 people with not a lot of sobriety, you might want to keep looking. But get somebody even on a temporary basis, just so you have somebody to talk to.
Well, and here's the deal. I was going to say, it's great that you're recovering from alcohol. It is on some level because there is more quality sobriety in AA. So go there, get the steps are the steps. And even in, I've had people say, well, he did the 12 steps for AA. This is a betrayed partner, but, I said, no, he didn't, because in the 4th and 5th steps, it talks about sexual behavior. So yes, you will need more than just AA or, other drugging, NACA, whatever it is, but there are more people with quality sobriety. So it would be a good place to get started and supplement with the S programs. But again, our drop-in groups are all hosted for a safe place. There are people that will do peer, work with you too. So, okay. For a betrayed partner, do you recommend a CSAT or an APSAT? I actually, there's my preferred. So the recommendations I make, and I make zillions a week. Okay, 100 a week. There's a partner, a CPTT is actually my preferred now. But even within that, I really work to have them be codependent aligned. Unfortunately, I still hear even CSATs use codependent language. The challenge with APSATs, and I think there are some good people in there, but they have a lot of coaches, and coaches are not mental health professionals, and so it's a little dicey. So there are, there's a lot of CSATs that are also CPTT trained, so they get the dual certification. So if you're looking for someone, email me, Tami, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. Tell me what you're looking for and where you're located, and I'll do my best to help you out. Okay, first D day was 6 years ago. 36-year marriage, relapses, lies, continue, separated 2 years. I have a CSAT. Formal therapeutic disclosure was 3 years ago. He is vindictive, resentful, retaliates, projects blame, triangulates, distorted lens, drinks every night, etc. He goes to CSAT weekly, SAA twice a week, refuses conjoint sessions and intensive. His antisocial and avoidant, all 3 levels of SA and with men. He said he'll get rid of me. I caused my trauma with 6 years of time, dollars in therapy. Why still no empathy, remorse, ownership, or softened heart? Not repentant. He's not in recovery. Like you
No,
can't expect.
he's still drinking every
Yeah,
night. He's
yeah,
not
yeah.
sober.
You spent a lot of dollars on someone who's continuing to do the same thing, but checking off a box that he's, and if he really is antisocial, I mean, there is a personality, disorder that he actually may be one of those people. I don't know. And I'm not trying to label him
And
as
we're
such,
not
but
going to know until he
no,
stops also drinking.
yes, but he can't have empathy, remorse. He's in active addiction. We both share. We're multi winners, and we could stop one, but if we're continuing the others, we're still in active addiction. It's so until and unless we stop all the problematic behaviors and address the underlying issues. I love the person above that was talking about, I've stopped drinking, doing drugs, and sex. That's yes. And you know what? Then you can work on real recovery. So, okay. Next question.
One of the things we treat at
Sorry.
Seeking Integrity is what we call paired substance sex addiction. A lot of times it's paired, but a lot of times, like me, I didn't pair my addictions, but I would bounce from one to the other. And, I get sober in one, but I'd be active in the other. And my behaviors did not change. I was still behaving like an addict because I still was an addict. And I mean, if he's drinking every night, he's still an addict, and an active addiction. So yeah, Tami nailed it. He's not sober.
Yeah, not any way stretch. And I should have added one more thing for you too. Healthy boundaries. You don't deserve to have nasty behavior to you. So what are you doing for your safety? You are the only one that can take care of you, because clearly he's not. So you having healthy boundaries for your safety, physical, financial, emotional, and spiritual. I say this all the time. And they're not, you didn't do this or you did that. It's, I value me. I'm the only one that's going to take care of me. So these are my boundaries. So, but somebody like that, yeah, I mean, we have a treatment program for people, like your husband. So, okay, follow up. This is from the earlier one with the sponsor. So, can I make a request? My partner does not discuss our relationship with his sponsor. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable request to make, but I doubt your husband's going to follow it. I mean, you can set a boundary and say, I don't feel safe when you discuss our relationship with him because I don't think we're getting good advice. So could you please just limit it to sobriety? I think that's a reasonable request. Whether he'll choose to follow it or not, who knows?
One of the things I was thinking is, because relationships are so problematic, and like we don't do them well. So getting help with that is important. I almost wonder though, if it's, I don't want to hear what your sponsors, if you talk to your sponsor, I mean, he's going to do what he's going to do. You can say, I don't think this is helpful for us. I feel like this person doesn't have the right, ability to help us. So if he says something to you, I don't want to hear about it. That is to me, a good boundary. Is like,
better than what I suggested. Yes.
Don't tell me. So
can you skip to the next one? Because I want to that one. Not sure about the saying hurt people. I have been deeply hurt. When I say hurt people, if I'm hurting people, it's because I've been hurt. But I'm not automatically going to hurt people simply because I've been hurt. I could also get PTSD, or I could just work through it and become a healthy person. So just because I've been hurt doesn't mean I'm automatically going to become an abuser. So thank you for asking that, because I always forget to clarify. It's not automatic thing. Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
but it says, why am I more willing to stop the hurt than my ex? You probably have less brokenness. I mean, we as addicts, are deeply broken people on the spectrum of it. But you also probably have more resiliency, and resiliency is something that we have to practice to learn. So I just think you have the ability to move through this better than your ex-partner. So give yourself kudos. It's not giving him a pass. Like, in no way are we saying, oh yeah, they all get to hurt. No.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. I am the betrayed partner of an SA. He has started a program and has been gone for a while. I am left with nothing but anger and resentment. In his mind, he sees us being together 100% when he finishes the program. But I do not know where I stand anymore with him, and definitely lost a lot of feelings for him after learning about the most recent things he has done. Should he know I feel this way while he is away, or is there something that should be talked about after he completes the program?
I guess we don't know where he is.
Yes. So here's the deal. Like with our and I don't know where he is, but
Right.
Different programs have different things. We have a family specialist that works with the betrayed partners of the guys who are in our residential program. You would talk about that with your family, with our clinician, and the treatment team talks. So they would also know, but yeah, we have there's a whole bunch of information that is gathered from the partners about, can he come home or not? What is like, and they don't all get to come home, so I think it really is there should be support for you at the place he's at. So I would really talk to them, and find out. I mean, I think that's no, I don't think it should. My personal feeling is no, it shouldn't be. You come home and then we start talking about it. Like, we've had guys that have gotten divorce papers while
Right.
they're in treatment. Guess what? That's a safe place for them to process
Right.
it. Is it a great day for them? No, but wow, they have the support to be able to handle it without just automatically acting out again. So there's safety in that, but I would invite you to talk to the program, to your connected person. Yeah, I don't know, they call different things, but we have a family specialist. So whatever their comparable person is, I would talk to that person.
And a lot of what happens in residential rehab is, I mean, these guys come in and they are not grounded in the truth or reality of what's happening. I mean, they still think everything's fine. I got to,
I just got to do the program and then we're going to be fine.
And a huge part of what we do is drop a big old bucket of reality on them, and a bucket of, wherever he is, he needs to know that you're not on the same page as him. You might be willing to stay together, but you've got some boundaries. I mean, that should be conveyed to him while he is in treatment. We're big believers in, this kind of stuff. It has to be discussed, and it's best if he's hit with it while he's in a safe setting and has the support of a gazillion therapists and other people who are in the same boat. And again, we don't know where he is. If he's here, we've reached out to you. We've asked you for all this info, so he's probably not with us. But I'm glad you're here.
And
I would encourage you to reach out to the program and say, I want to get on the same page.
And make sure, like we give, if for those that don't have a qualified professional to work with that are willing to do that. And we really encourage, it's not that you need therapy, like the addict does, but you deserve support. This is, I'm left with nothing but anger and resentment. Well, getting help to process through that. And like I said, we make referrals in a pro-dependent lens, so we really don't want to hear. In fact, if I do, I've got a little cheat list of people that I don't refer to anymore because, they're really placing blame on partners, and it's not nothing you did or didn't do. So, but you having a safe place to work through the anger and resentment. And I will share too, tomorrow morning at 8:30 Pacific time, there's a betrayed partner drop-in group. Please join that. On Friday, there's a webinar in the afternoon. There's a bunch of different resources free, but the podcast, Dr. Rob's Sex, Love, and Addiction has had over 1.2 million downloads. It's actually starting to get closer to 1.3 million downloads. There's resources for you here. That betrayed partner group that I mentioned that starts in June, it's a betrayed partner work group. It's on Seeking Integrity. So email me, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com if you've got any questions. But you know, that program shouldn't be leaving you in a vacuum. There should be support for you while he's in treatment. So okay, I think we did it. So
thank you, Tami, for joining us. David will be back next week, and I'll be feeling better, hopefully. So
sleep with the window shut and the filter on.
yeah.
So all right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.